Hello, everyone, and welcome to Divide and Conquer. We're named as such because of our intent. What is our intent? We are a group of sport and performance psychology consultants and contractors here at Fort Polk, Louisiana. We also fall under the Army Resilience Directorate, and you can find them at Army Resilience on Facebook and Twitter. So each episode, we pose a question or issue related to resiliency and or performance enhancement that we as a group will conquer through our individual answers, and you'll find out quickly our perspectives and stances are often divided. My name's Diego, and I'll pass it off to my co-hosts,
Morgan.
And Jess.
We hope that you enjoy our takes on today's topic, which is what, Jess?
Well, today's topic I think is an interesting one, and that is when comparing today's athletes or high performers to those of back in the day, is performance improvement due to humans or technology? And just for the sake of defining what back in the day is, let's say 50 to 100 years ago back in the day. So to start us off, I'm going to shoot it over to Morgan.
I have two thoughts. So I think in some ways the improvement in performance is due to technology, but in other ways it's performance, or the performance improvement is due to humans. So I think human-wise, speaking from swimming history, that, and I know this isn't 50 to 100 years ago, it's more like, 12 years ago, maybe, in swimming community, 2008 going into the Beijing Olympics, or in that time frame, swimming came out with a tech suit, so a highly developed leg suit. So men and women would wear suits that go from their shoulders all the way down to their ankles. And those suits they created a core for you. So if you didn't have the stability core-wise or weren't as strong in your core, then the suit would create that for you. And it improved like oxygen for your muscles and altered the lactic acid that flowed through. But there was a whole lot that happened with this particular suit. I just remember a video of a tech suit in the water with a 5-pound weight on it, and the suit would float. So if that paints the picture for you of how much this suit does for someone's performance, it was insane. And that particular Olympics, I think that was the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, Michael Phelps broke all of the records. All of them. He was wearing the suit, but 2 years later, in 2010-ish, after 2 years of wearing the tech suits across swimming, they banned it. So there was no longer, you're no longer allowed to wear these particular suits. You're no longer allowed to wear ankle suits, and so they put more restrictions on the suits that you were allowed to wear. And the next Olympics and the Olympics since that time frame, swimmers have still broken records. So it wasn't dependent. Sure, the suits absolutely helped people out, but the records that were made with the suits have been broken. So to me, that shows there's something about human performance, like humans, without technology that's improving just in the last 12 years. But then on the other hand, I think about, and I'm not a football guru, so just maybe you have more thoughts or more detail for this particular topic, but I think about the long careers, and really the only long careers I know are Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. I think he had a long career. And Drew Brees. What was the other one? He played for the Jets. Retired, came back.
Brett Favre.
Yeah, him, Brett Favre. Football. And I think about people with long careers like that compared to, I don't know what the standard career was 50 years ago. I imagine it wasn't as long. And so the difference there, I can only think, is improvement in technology, so concussion helmets protecting that element, or the improvements that have been made when it comes to recovery or treating injuries and that kind of stuff. So I think maybe in other realms, it's more of the technology that assists performance. But what do y'all think?
What I have to say is sort of lending credence to what you just said, Morgan. So my lens through this is through soccer. So looking at professional soccer, we're living and have been living in an unprecedented time in terms of athletic ability and sheer skill. So two of the best players who have ever played are currently playing right now. and they're probably 1 and 2 respectively in terms of the best players of all time. I'm talking about Messi and Ronaldo. So they're both extremely good at their craft for very different reasons. So Messi, I would say, is arguably the more talented one, but he's smaller. I would argue probably not as strong as Ronaldo, but he has an incredible understanding of the game and an incredible understanding of his teammates' positioning and the way his team plays. Whereas Ronaldo, he was, of course, born with some type of athletic disposition, but I think that would take away from his overall achievement and hard work that he had to put in to get to where he is now. So he's 35 years old, and I don't know how true this is, but a lot of the testing that he does, like to assess his physical readiness and like VO2 max and all that, he's running and performing, I think, 7 years below his age. So basically, a soccer player peaks around 28, so that's where he's playing, physically at least. And he's been known for an intense work ethic and conditioning regimen throughout the season, not just preseason. He is tenacious and has probably the best one of, if not the best, attitudes towards being a professional athlete, and it shows. He's probably going to be playing well into his 40s, and hopefully here in America, but that's neither here nor there. So you very rarely saw people of that caliber, let alone playing at that high level for as long as both of those athletes have been playing. I think a lot of it is due to technology, like you said, but also I think what underlines the technology aspect is just a greater understanding, more knowledge regarding what it means to be a professional athlete and the different disciplines that make up the support staff and what informs these professional athletes in terms of the things they need to do to maintain or to improve their physical readiness, but also their tactical and strategic skills, mindset, however you want to say it. It wasn't too long ago in England where they didn't take the health side seriously in terms of professional sports. Many professional soccer players were still smoking during halftime breaks, recreationally after games and practices, and that all stopped towards, I think, the late 90s. And now you're seeing England is one of the most intense soccer leagues. The way they play, for the most part, involves so much more intensity and so much more. I don't know if it's so much more running, but the play styles lend themselves to individuals who are much more predispositioned to be great athletes as opposed to great soccer players. Even though they're both not mutually exclusive, but that's the type of player that seems to excel. And a lot of that's due to more information regarding what professional athletes need to eat, what they need to do with sleeping, hygiene, and a lot of that information comes from testing. So the advances in technological aspect of assessing where athletes are to establish a baseline and where they can be based on that information, and the things necessary to do in order to get to that improvement based on that baseline or whatever metrics they use. I think that incorporates not only the technological aspect, but also the human aspect. I mean, humans have to come up with the technology, so to speak. And they need to have the knowledge in terms of how to use these different metrics, these different testing methods, and all this information in a way that's conducive for the pro athlete that they're responsible for. Long-winded.
Very thorough, both of you, so thank you. I think for me, what makes the most sense would be, to Diego's point, is yes, we are using, in fact, as humans, we are using more of the technology in a way that is benefiting us, but I would argue that it is because of technology alone that we are getting better. So yes, we do have to interpret the assessments, but if we think about, let's go with, you take the Olympics. Majority of the time, who is dominating the Olympics? It's going to be countries that have the money to be able to do those tests, pay for the most elite trainers, the most up-to-date equipment, so on and so forth. If you take other sports and you kind of assess, well, where have we moved to? So let's take basketball. Basketball, a lot of people now take games off. So they're going to rest their players. So like Kawhi Leonard is a great example of someone that he's actively said, oh, I'm going to rest myself because I know that I want to be ready for the playoffs. Players didn't do that back in the day. Equally, like LeBron James has a hyperbolic chamber in his house. Like, what an advantage. That's why you can potentially play till he's 35 now. Who knows how long he'll play, but that was unheard of. And I know Vince Carter just retired.
Mm-hmm.
He's 40 something. And like that's unheard of for a basketball player. Like you just don't play and your knees are going to give out. Like you're tall, you're jumping a lot, you're cutting a lot. Like that's just absurd. Then cycling. We're not necessarily getting better. The bikes are improving, and then we're also resorting to things like blood doping. And then, I mean, I don't want to get into all that, but simply going, well, we've seen these advances, but we've also seen things cut into why people are getting better. Hence, a lot of technology, a lot of cutting corners. Unfortunately, you don't want to see things like PEDs and blood doping and all that. But so performance-enhancing drugs for those PEDs, that's what that means. And you take soccer. So they did something more recently where they would strap, and now you'll see it. It's like, why do all the players have like this weird hump on their back, but they're strapping the heart rate monitor, and they're tracking their progress throughout the games to see like A, how far they ran, B, like how much or what zones they were in, and then they can tell you exactly when they should be sitting. So like in order to peak, in order to sit them at the right times, it's tracking all of that. It was like a continuing ed class, and it was just purely on that. It was fascinating. I was like, wow, I didn't realize they had that. And then that makes so much more sense for coaches to not have to time things just by looks. Oh, she looks tired, he looks tired. Or, oh, this opponent, like you can strategically map that out ahead of time going, here's where they're going to peak, here's where they're going to need to rest. And so all of that stuff then provides for the best performance possible, when back in the day, people just played to play. And they didn't necessarily have any support in the sense of training, in the sense of training or a team or all of this high-tech equipment. They literally would just figure it out and go out there and do it. And even if you've ever read, I know Diego, we've talked about this, Born to Run, tribes in Mexico literally will run on tires. It's like, my shoes are tires, and it's a flip-flop, which if you've ever run in a flip-flop, like I've face-planted before because I don't know. It's difficult. And then they're running more than a marathon daily. They're just running. So I can't imagine anyone doing that today without having like ample training. But they've seemed to figure it out all of those years ago. And now today we have to we insert a lot of different things to help us perform at our best. And the advice would probably be, you shouldn't be running 30, 50 miles a day. Like, stop. But they continue to do it. So I would say training and technology is in fact the reason why people are improving.
This just popped into my head. So it's like, is this the first step of becoming cyborgs?
I mean, if you have a bionic arm, you are in fact a cyborg. So maybe. Well, think about it, even like Tommy John surgery and stuff for pitchers, and some of the things that they decide to put into people they've never done before. So like, oh, we're going to take this from an animal. Have you heard of that? Like, they'll take animal parts and they'll put it in people, and it's because it's stronger. So by that alone, well, if I can get, I'm just making this up, I don't know what they actually do, but if it's like a pig's thigh is stronger than a human, and I put it in my shoulder and it helps me to be more elastic, and therefore I'm pitching faster, well, that's an advantage that other people don't have. And or let me also have the same surgery, let me get hurt so I can have a pig thigh in my arm. That sounds terrible, but like a pig thigh in my arm to also match what you now have set as the standard for pitching.
I think a very real example of that would be, I mean, look at our cell phones. They're basically an extension of ourselves at this point. So anybody without one, a smartphone particularly, is at a severe disadvantage no matter what domain they're in. But think about it from sports. So let's say, I don't know, some teams are underfunded for whatever reason it might be. And what if they don't have access, or at least a stable access to information that could potentially help them train better, be more efficient, understand recovery a bit more so that it works more for the athletes, versus a team that has all that readily available. And let's say they both play in the same division or league or whatever it might be. One's going to be at a severe disadvantage.
I see where technology can make a significant impact on the way you train or even, I guess, performance. But I still want to say that people are getting better because I don't necessarily look at technology as what it sounds like we're defining as like resources. Dang, I just keep hitting things. Shucks. Where was my train of thought going?
Choo.
Side note, this reminds me of that picture my friend sent me about the way I tell stories and how like I give too much detail and then I lose my train of thought and then it's like, shucks, I've been talking too long, like, and then I finally speed up, get to my point, and I say I'm sorry. So here we are. Here we are. We're on the train of thought part.
You still want to say that humans are more responsible?
Yes, I still want to say that humans are more responsible because I don't really necessarily consider an understanding of how we should be eating or resting or using mental performance training or whatever the holistic training looks like as technology. Like, sure, as a society, we've had to use research and technology to understand those things, but those are more resources to me and less technology that I use in the moment in my performance to improve. So thinking about marathons, the shoes that just came out with like propelling someone forward, that to me is technology. Tech suits, that is technology. Concussions, like helmets that they wear in football that help you like stay protected, like technology. So that's what I think of as technology aiding my performance. And at the same time, I can see how technology influences our resources. But at the end of the day, the athlete has to choose to call on those resources, which not everybody does. But you have to wear a suit, you have to wear a helmet, you have to wear shoes. So that's an athlete's choice. And the other reason I want to stay with like humans are improving because part of me looks at sport as like this, it's supposed to be like a pure like competition demonstration of abilities and effort and heart, motivation, all of that stuff. And to say that technology influences that almost to me corrupts the idea of what sport is intended to be, whether we're talking about elite athletes or all the way down to youth athletes. And I think we see that too, that people at elite levels or even youth elite athletes or all the way up the chain, the more technology involved to push performance quality, you start to value performance outcome over the purity behind what sport is supposed to be. So, end thought.
So, I agree. I think I don't want to say that humans are not improving. They are. My point was simply that they're improving because of technology. Not so if you were to take the technology away, I think we would be in the same place as where we were 50 to 100 years ago. I don't think that we as a human species are getting significantly like, evolving so quickly. It is the technology that is helping us evolve because it is in fact giving us feedback on various aspects of us and our performances that help us then propel ourselves. So I'm with you. And you're right. Like I think the outcome aspect of it, we get so ingrained in breaking records, being the best of the best, and it's all tied to a lot of things like fame, money, competition, that back in the day maybe that wasn't as on our minds. It still was, but yes, we have pulled away from doing sport just to do sport, and now it's tied to so many things that we have to play catch up, and we're constantly looking for just a little bit of a leg up.
Part of what you said reminded me of a portion in the book I'm reading, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. He talks about how people, so humans, are designed in a way that allows us to adjust or take control or manage the environment to suit us versus us adjusting to suit the environment, which is the part where we're suited to control or manipulate environment to suit us. Kind of reminds me of what you're talking about with we use technology to our advantage in training so that we can manipulate sport environment or sport performance.
So maybe we should have made a distinction between, well, this is kind of backtracking, but what you were saying earlier, Morgan, about how you view technology that you would attribute increases in performance to as things that seemingly to me, things that help in the moment. Mm-hmm. versus things that can be used like during preseason or continue the season, but outside of the actual performance. It's still influencing the performance, but it's not necessarily being used in the moment.
Yes. We can train a certain way, and then when we get to the performance or to the game, the moment that really matters, performance can change. So what we do training, yes, has an influence on our performance, but performance isn't controlled by what words, okay? By what we do. Performance in the moment isn't controlled by influenced, yes, but not controlled by what we've done in the past. It's what we're doing in the moment. So I'm thinking technology in that moment influencing my performance. So if someone's wearing something on their back, like saying, I need to rest now, to me, that's technology because it's in that, that moment.
That makes sense to me.
How would you then define, let's say I get injured, take some games off, and I'm resting, I'm doing different modalities to get better. If then that's the case, I could potentially come back if I'm doing this thing right where I'm healing well. I can come back a day, a week, a month earlier than normal. And then equally, had I healed in the off time that I'm not playing, then I'm less likely to re-injure myself potentially if I'm strong enough versus if you've ever been rushed back from an injury, you go out there too early. What do? You tend to favor that, side or whatever the case may be. I put myself at risk and or I'm just not ready and let's say I pull my hamstring again. So I hear you, but equally I think all of that stuff outside of just in the moment also completely and overwhelmingly adds to your performance. Because even thinking about confidence, so if I'm still feel injured, if I feel burnout, if I feel certain things, how does that impact my confidence, which then in the moment is absolutely going to play into my performance?
I hear you, and I'm not saying that I'm hardcore, it's people are improving. I definitely see, because with the football thing, that's kind of what I was thinking of when I talked about football in the very beginning, like these longer careers because of what they do outside of I wanted to say court, and I promise you I know that it's field. Shucks. Gosh. What they do outside of that field matters or impacts their careers or how long they are able to play or their recovery time. Absolutely. So it's kind of, I see both, but I still think that there is an element of people are getting better. But maybe it does circle back to the information we realize about like how we need to be treating our bodies, and maybe that is considered technology. So I understand both perspectives. It's more of like a both and, not necessarily a either or. But I still want to say, just for that purity of sport thought, that it's people also.
Chicken or the egg?
Both.
Chicken and the egg.
Yes.
So if we were to bring in a military example, I think something that would be the most obvious is that there is less hand-to-hand combat going on if you were to be deployed, and there is more use of technology. Like I just saw that there's it was like $400 million. Don't quote me on that number. I think it's $400 million contract that got rewarded for cyber drones to go out. So even thinking through, well, how do we collect information, which then informs our strategies, informs like what we need to be doing, what we don't need to be doing. If that is based now not so much on talking to people as much or using people to go gather information, but it's rather I'm going to use technology to then inform my decisions. I think that plays a role into we are getting better because of technology allows for more efficiency, better use of our people. We're not running people down, and so on and so forth. But I think a military personnel would have to speak directly to that.
Yeah, just as you were talking, I was thinking about I was walking through, I know we're Army, but the Air Force Museum, and looking at the evolution of aircrafts from the Wright brothers planes all the way to what we have today. And then even in reading the book Unbroken, how many planes or how unstable planes were just in what you had said like 50 to 100 years ago as opposed to now. Definitely you can see how the changes in technology have impacted the way the world does war. But it's interesting because I wonder if it's because the style of war has changed, and that's why you need the technology, because it is much more technology based versus a while back. Yes, a while back. War was very different in that you're running at somebody. So But maybe because we have the technology now, that has caused war to change completely. But again, I agree. Military personnel would have to speak to that a little bit more.
For sure.
So if you're listening and you want to share your thoughts on what your perspective is, particularly for military or sport and high-performing athletes, let us know. Do you think that performance is changing because people are changing or because of the technology? If you don't want to comment, you can shoot us a DM and we can kind of protect your identity.
Yeah, we'll try to work with you as best we can. We want to incorporate our listeners' input and what their thoughts are, because we find this stuff interesting. And if you do too, we definitely want to hear from you.
100%.
100%.
100%.
Oh, gosh.
So I think that concludes this week's episode before we lose our minds. Thank you all once again for listening to this week's episode of Divide and Conquer. Again, we are part of the Army Resilience Directorate, and you can find them at Army Resilience on Facebook and Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook and YouTube at R2 Performance Center Fort Polk, which, I mean, ideally you would have known that already. But on YouTube or on Facebook, feel free to leave your thoughts on either platform. We will do our best to not only acknowledge, but interact with you.
I was about to say, I will throw out a challenge of someone leave a comment, and I love responding to people's comments. I can't help myself, so I will respond if you say something.
Jess, do you have Facebook?
Oh, yeah, not on Facebook, but I will respond. I don't have any social media. However, sometimes I'll creep on our own page because they let you look at some of Facebook
Like a
without being.
snapshot of it.
Yeah. So I don't even know if I'm seeing all of it. I have no idea what Facebook really looks like anymore. But I will respond on YouTube. I can do that and without having to actually sign on and have an account.
You can use my Facebook to respond to people.
Thank you. And then I'll just put this is Jess under Morgan's name.
#Jess.
#Jess.
All right, y'all. Have a nice day.
Outskis.